So it is wonderful to be together with you all today. For anyone who's watching later, I'm Toby Shulruff, and this presentation is for the Co-Designing Future class at Arizona State University in the Public Interest Technology program. Today, I'm going to be talking to you about tools to increase safety for domestic violence survivors who are visiting websites, specifically a quick exit button. So the key point that led me to this question and to spend time on this project was that seeking help online for issues related to domestic violence should not result in a greater risk in real life. So I should have the capacity to find information, to find a hotline number, to reach out for help through web chat without worrying that doing that will put me at greater risk. Technology has become increasingly interwoven with our lives, and as a result, that means that people who are using violence and abuse to harm somebody else, to control somebody else, are also using technology to do those same things. So some of the ways that we see that turning up in my work at the Safety Net Project at the National Network to End Domestic Violence include technology being used to threaten other people, specifically victims of domestic violence, to also limit access to technology as a way of increasing isolation and control, and then also to use technology and the many wonderful tools that we have in our everyday lives, unfortunately for negative purposes, to surveil people. And really all of that centers on the heart of domestic violence dynamics, which is coercion and control, that the person who is harming somebody else desires to control as many aspects of their lives as they can, and to get them to do their will. So in my professional experience and in the stakeholder interview that I did for this class, the worries that come up specifically when a survivor of domestic violence is looking for information online is that someone else might come into the room and see what's on the screen on a computer or what's on the screen as I'm holding a phone in my hand. There's also a concern that later on, they might be checking my browser history, seeing what websites I visited. They might do this in a very obvious way so that I know that they're controlling what I'm doing, that they're watching what I'm doing, or they might do it surreptitiously. They might be sneaky about it and go back later to find out what's happening. There's also a concern because I think of a general lack of understanding for the general populace about how ads and cookies work. There's this concern that later on I might be browsing something else, or someone else in my home might be browsing something else, and an ad related to domestic violence might come up that also raises a red flag, which could put me in danger. And then overarching all of that, there's a concern that stalkerware, which is also known as spyware or monitoring software, might be active on a phone that I'm using or a computer that I'm using. And so that goes deeper than browser history, but would include everything that I type, everything that I do, my location if I'm carrying a phone around. So those are the kind of worries that come up for people who are supporting survivors of domestic violence, who are also the people who would be having a website there to provide information and support. So really this, as I mentioned, the ads and cookies, it gets to a deeper issue, this term surveillance capitalism, which Shoshana Zuboff brought to the forefront of public conversation, this idea that our online activities, the web itself, is built to collect, to store, and to share information. And while this has privacy concerns for all of us as citizens, as consumers, as people, when it comes to people who are experiencing domestic violence or trafficking or other forms of gender-based violence, this privacy risk can become a safety risk. So over the past 2 decades, domestic violence programs on the local level in the US and internationally have gone from maybe not having a web presence at all, to almost universally having some sort of website that at least delivers information, if not services. And so way back, in a sort of geeky way, we might put something that looks like the keyboard button, the escape button up there, but recognizing that that was sort of a narrow focus. Those buttons nowadays usually say the word exit or quick exit, something similar to that. They're made to be somewhat prominent so that you could notice them. And they usually, when you click on them, go to an alternate site. For example, what's the weather? Or very often nowadays, they go to a Google search page. An innovation a little bit later on was that might happen by opening a second tab. So your original tab might still be open, but you have a new tab that is just that general content. In the past 2 years, people have started to innovate and work to increase the safety of these options by, for example, not just redirecting to one additional site, but maybe cycling through 12 additional sites to push the domestic violence website address further and further and further down the browser history to make it just a little bit harder to find. And in the past year, a few organizations in the US and internationally have started adding a bit of code so that the domestic violence site is removed entirely from browser history. Unfortunately, that doesn't work with all browsers, and it doesn't delete any kind of search that you might have done on Google, for example, to get to that domestic violence site. So what I'm proposing is a combination of code, right? Pulling sort of the existing best practices, the piece that deletes from browser history, the piece that cycles through additional sites, combining that with guidance, because just having that code isn't enough. What is the most recognizable button? Sometimes people don't even notice that there is a quick escape button. Perhaps adding some additional information or language so that people can learn more about private browsing options and how they can have greater anonymity and privacy on the internet. Combining those together through implementation by sharing that basic information at no cost to local domestic violence programs, again, throughout the United States and internationally, to really up the level of how these buttons are implemented. But the thing that rests with me and that I really put out as a call to you all to think about is whether we can take the concept of privacy by design, this idea that our tools should be built with privacy in mind from the beginning and not just as an add-on. If we can take that and really try and contribute to the specific and very tangible, real safety concerns that domestic violence victims are facing, and look at something like safety by design. How can we relate our desire to sort of help everybody to have just a little bit more privacy online and to realize how that can have very real life consequences for a smaller group of people, but how that can really benefit everyone. Similar to how curb cuts designed for folks who are using wheelchairs have made sort of a quality of life improvement for everyone who uses sidewalks that have curb cuts in them. So I will end there and I'm happy to take questions. I realized I could also show you really quickly just what one of these sample quick exit buttons looks like. So to do that, I will take you over to the ubiquitous Google. I'm using Chrome here for the demonstration because unfortunately my favorite browser, Firefox, is one of the ones that does not actually allow for the deletion of the website history. So I'm going to go ahead and take you to the US National Domestic Violence Hotline. And you can see as you arrive there, there are sort of options for calling and chatting, and you can see there's a red exit button here. I'm going to go ahead and push that and just show you what happens. So this has been redirected. Got it. Thanks for the privacy message, Google. It has redirected me over to a Google search page. And our friends in the UK have implemented an exit button, which you can see is not red, but is down here at the bottom. And when you click that, it's opened a new tab. And you can see that this old tab here is now cycling through a variety of different, or should be anyway, cycling through a variety of different sites. There we go. Now, in this case, the organization chose to buy a bunch of URLs. So they own all the ones that are being cycled through here. And As you can see, that takes some time, right? So all of this is in need of like some innovation and improvement. And you can see it's pushing that previous site down further and further into the history, and that you can't in fact see the website that we started out